Hey, thanks for tuning in. Today we're diving into one of the most significant events in American history, the Civil War. The conflict that shaped the nation we know today was fought from 1861 to 1865, but the causes behind it are complex and multifaceted. So, why was the Civil War fought? Let's break it down. At its core, the Civil War was about a deep divide in the United States over slavery, states' rights, and the future direction of the country. But it's very important to note that while there were multiple issues at play, slavery was that defining factor. So, slavery is the central issue. It was the cornerstone of the Southern economy, especially in the states that relied on large scale agriculture, such as cotton and tobacco farming. The North, on the other hand, was more industrialized, with a growing abolitionist movement that viewed slavery as morally wrong and inconsistent with the principles of freedom and democracy upon which the country was founded. The Southern states, fearing that the abolition of slavery would destroy their way of life and their economy, sought to protect and expand the institution. In the years leading up to the war, tensions between the North and the South escalated as new states were added to the Union. Would these new states allow slavery, or would they be free states? The question sparked fierce debates, especially following events like the Missouri Compromise in 1820 and the Kansas Nebraska Act in 1854, both of which attempted to balance the interests of slaveholding and non slaveholding states. But these legislative compromises were just band aids over a growing wound. From the Southern perspective, the Civil War was about states' rights, the idea that states should have the authority to govern themselves without interference from federal government. This was particularly important in regards to the issue of slavery. Southern leaders believed they had the right to determine their own policies, including whether or whether not to allow slavery. However, the issue of states' rights was inextricably linked to the institutions of slavery. It wasn't about states' rights in general, but rather the rights of states to maintain and expand slavery. Southern states feared that the federal government, under the growing influence of Northern abolitionists, would eventually take away their right to own slaves, and this fear became more pronounced with the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, who, while not outright was an abolitionist, was opposed to expansion of slavery into the new territories. So, with the election of Lincoln was the final straw for those Southern states. They believed their way of life was under that direct threat, and as a result, several states began to secede from the Union, starting with South Carolina in December of 1860. By the time Lincoln took office in March of 61, 7 Southern states had seceded, forming the Confederate States of America. The Confederacy argued they had the right to leave the Union because the federal government was infringing on their rights, particularly regarding slavery. Lincoln, however, rejected this idea. He believed that secession was illegal and the Union must be preserved at all cost. His main goal was to keep the country together, even if it meant going to war. And so, in April 1861, the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter in South Carolina, marking the beginning of the Civil War. To pivot away from slavery, we also had economics. These economics played a crucial role in the conflict. The Southern economy was deeply tied to agriculture, especially cotton, which was produced largely through slave labor. The North's economy, however, was more diverse and industrialized, which made it less reliant on slavery. As the North's industrial power grew, so did its opposition to slaves. Many in the North saw slavery not only as a moral evil, but also as an economic threat to free labor, believing that it hindered the country's economic progress. The South, meanwhile, felt that its economic survival was tied to the continuation of slavery. They believed that without it, the agricultural economy would collapse. This economic divide further deepened tensions between the two regions. As the war raged on, it became clear that the fight was about more than just preserving the Union and defending the states. In 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that all enslaved people in Confederate held territory were set to be free. While this didn't immediately end slavery, it shifted the focus of the war, making the abolition of slavery a central goal for the Union. By the time the war ended in 1865, over 600,000 Americans had lost their lives. The Confederacy had been defeated, the Union preserved, and the slavery abolished with the passage of the 13th Amendment. So, why was the Civil War fought? While there were several contributing factors, states' rights, those economic differences, and some political tensions, slavery was the central issue. The Southern states fought to protect and expand slavery, while the North fought to preserve the Union and eventually to end the institution of slavery. The Civil War was a turning point in American history, one that ultimately led to a more unified nation, but at tremendous cost. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. We hope this gave you a clearer understanding of the causes of the Civil War. Stay with us for more deep dives into history, and until next time, hope you keep learning.